I want to welcome you to this episode of Colonial Gardens Gardening. And what we're going to do today is talk about some of the things that are not as fun when you're talking about the gardening. You've planted all your garden, you've already done all your selection of your plants, your tomatoes, and everything is ready to go, but now what are you going to do? How do you maintain it? How do you keep your garden weed-free, healthy, and prospering throughout the summer season? And I want to show you a few tips and tricks that will get you off to the right track. So first thing I want to talk about today is a little bit of weeding. Not everybody's favorite thing to do, but I actually like weeding. I find it to be very therapeutic. So one of the things I want to do is weed properly. So the first thing that I like to do is select a good tool. I've got a few out here today, different types of tools that I use in the garden out here at Colonial. These are a couple of long-handled tools. This one's called a Colonial hoe. You'll notice it's a flat blade, very thin, very sharp. It's used for just scalping right across the top of the soil surface, just to get those small, very small weeds as they're germinating. You want to get them when they're small before they get very big with this type of a hoe. This next one I've got here is a stirrup hoe. It's used in the same way. You can go after a little bit bigger weeds like this with this one, and I'll show you how it works, the action on this one. But you can see it has a little bit of motion to it, so it moves back and forth, and I'll explain that when we get into it. If you've got a smaller space, I like a wire weeder. This is a hand tool, very small, very delicate for getting in between small spaces. If you're getting under lettuce or you're getting around the base of your tomato plants, it works really well. It's very good for getting into those small spaces, and again, it's very thin, so I'll show you. We're just going to scrape along the top of the soil surface when we use this hoe. So let's do some hoeing. So I have a bed of lettuce here. I'm going to use my Colonial hoe, and the way I want to use this hoe, I'm going to step right over here to this bare spot right here, and the way we use this hoe is we just drag it along the soil surface. I want to get the top 1/4 inch of soil, and I don't want to go any deeper, because the deeper I go, the more weed seed I'm going to turn up. So I just want to just gently scrape. You can see I'm just gently scraping, and I use the sharp end and I just pull it along. This is a nice easy motion. You shouldn't be spending a lot of work like this. I always like to do this kind of hoeing, do this kind of maintenance when it's really dry. If you can get that, you see how this top layer is really dry, and these weeds just pull up really easily. All you need to do is turn these roots up and get them exposed to air. If they're exposed to air for several hours in a nice sunny windy day, those roots will not make it and those plants will die. So they can lay right on the soil surface like that. It'll add some good organic matter back into your garden. So you can see I just kind of move in between, and you can go a little bit faster once you get used to the motion of the hoe. You can just slide right underneath and get all those weeds just turned over like that. So a nice easy way to get around and clean up your garden space. Now, the important thing about weeding a garden, vegetable garden like this, is to get those weeds when they're very small. If you're waiting till the weeds are shin high or knee high or waist high, that's too late. Those plants are already starting to rob essential nutrients from your plants. They're could be bringing in disease or insects or other things. So you want to get them when they're very, very small. In fact, getting out to do some hoeing in the garden before you see any weeds can be very beneficial. You're getting the weeds as they're just starting to germinate under the ground. A really good time to get those weeds early. So I like to get out here, even if you don't see a lot of weed pressure, go over and make a nice easy pass, Colonial hoe, and run it along and take care of some of those weeds in between your plants. Let me show you how this stirrup hoe works. So I explained the stirrup hoe a little bit. It has kind of a back and forth motion. So the way you do this one is you set it right on the ground, again, like you did with the Colonial hoe, but we're just moving it back and forth. And what this does is, in the push motion, it will turn up the weeds, and in the pull motion, it will turn them over. So let me get over here in a bigger space so you can see. So if I'm going along here, I'm going to do a push-pull motion, and you can see it just cultivates and pulls the roots right out. Better for a bigger space. You can cover a little more ground with this type of a hoe. It's harder to get in around your lettuce plants, like I said, so that's when a linear hoe might work a little bit better. But it's just the push-pull action that you can really turn those weeds over. Like I said, I find weeding to be very therapeutic, going and tilling the soil. Light action like that. If you do have some small spaces, the hand hoe works really well too if your lettuce plants, mine are nice and big. You see, if you need to get down and around the base, maybe you need a hand hoe like this. These hand hoes also work really well if you have a container garden or a raised bed where you can't get a full-size hoe in there. Something like this will really help get around and cultivate the soil right around the base of your plants and get them all taken care of. Okay, now you've got all your weeds turned over. Now an important thing to think about is, like I said, if these weeds, if the roots are exposed to air, they're going to die pretty quickly. They're going to desiccate. Now if we go through and do our maintenance in the same day, if we do our weeding and then start watering, what are we doing? We're watering these plants right back in. So we don't want to do that. So weed on a dry day and then don't water, and then go ahead and water on another day once these weed seeds or weeds have started to desiccate a little bit. So let me show you about watering, since I talked about it. When I water, I like to use a watering wand like this. What the wand does, as you'll see, it provides a nice gentle shower. Used a hose, the water comes out in a stream, and it can really make holes into your soil and really move the soil around and cause some erosion. So if you have a gentle rain shower like this, it's really going to be the best watering, soft watering for your plants. Now what I'm going to want to do with these plants is, as much as I can, I'm trying to water the soil, not the plants. This is not the best way to water a plant. You're getting a lot of water on the foliage, which you don't necessarily want. I'm not as concerned with lettuce versus something like a tomato or a pepper, but if I can water the soil more, that's where the plant needs the water anyway. So I try to water around these lettuce plants. Like I said, it's more important with a tomato or a pepper or some of your fruiting crops where you don't want that water foliage to sit on the leaves too long. And watering best. I don't like to water late into the evening. I don't want water to sit on this foliage overnight. That could be a way to bring in and invite disease into your garden, and you definitely don't want that. So you want to do everything you can to make sure the water that you're putting on your plants dries before we go into the evening hours. So, you know, think by 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening, if you haven't got your water done, you might want to save it for tomorrow morning. Go ahead and hit it first thing in the morning and get that watering taken care of. So a nice gentle shower is good, but then watch out for your evening watering. We don't want to do that real late. The other thing I wanted to talk about would be a little bit of fertilizer. Your plants are going to need fertilizer. Just because you put fertilizer down last year doesn't mean that that fertilizer is still going to be there. So you're going to need to apply fertilizer. For crops like tomatoes or longer season crops, I sometimes will fertilize twice. I'll fertilize when I plant, and then I'll fertilize about halfway through, a light dose, maybe a half a dose, just to kind of give them a little bit of shot through that late part of the season. With a lettuce crop, I'm not as worried about a second fertilizer, but I always fertilize when I'm planting. So when the plants are a little bit smaller, that's when I'm going to put my fertilizer on. So if we step over here, we can see these young plants here. These lettuce plants were just planted, and I'm going to use a fertilizer and just sprinkle it along and try to mainly fertilize around my plants. I don't want to fertilize the area around the bare soil. That's where the weeds are. I don't want to feed the weeds if I don't have to. So I don't want to water the weeds, and I don't want to fertilize the weeds. But a light fertilizer, whether it be synthetic or organic, that's up to you, your choice. But this is an alfalfa-based fertilizer that I'm using here. I like to help build my soil when I'm fertilizing, so this is a nice one for building soil health as well as providing some nutrition to my plants. So my lettuce crop is going to need just a once when it's planted fertilizer, and then it should be good to go for its life cycle. Like I said, tomatoes and peppers, with about August, I might give it a light shot of fertilizer just to help get it. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about in this section is we spent some good money on tools. We bought some nice hand tools. I like to buy things that are going to last, that are good quality, rather than having to replace them a lot. So I like to take care of my tools. And one way you can do it is finish your work in the garden. Obviously clean them up a little bit, get any of the excess soil there. And I like to dip them in a bucket of sand. What the sand does, it gives you a little abrasion. So to kind of clean off any dirt that you've got on your hoe, just kind of draw it through a few times. It'll get it a little bit cleaner, knock that sand off, and you can see it's already taken some of the sand off. Some people will put a little bit of vegetable oil or something into there to provide a little bit of protection from rust or some things like that. But just a run through the sand a little bit will really help get that hoe cleaned up and nice and and sharp for the next use. Same thing with your handles. If you put on a little bit of linseed oil or some sort of a wood protectant on these handles, they take a lot of use, they take a lot of abuse. Sometimes they get left out in the rain, so it's good to protect them from any type of degradation they could have on those handles. Expensive tools, take care of them. They're good quality tools. So that's what I'm excited to talk to you about today, was a little bit of maintenance things. They're not as fun things, but they're the things that you need to have a good, healthy garden. So again, this is Bryn from Colonial. I'd love for you to come out and see us. Look forward to seeing you next time.